Hey, good morning, good afternoon, hello, happy Monday. Damon, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Kurt, and ready to go.
Let's rock and roll. How was your weekend?
It was great.
You
Nice
survived?
weather. Got outside. Just tons of fun.
Tis the season. Tis the season, man. Damon, are you sitting down for this one?
I am.
It looks like you are. Okay. I have been thrilled and excited for this one for a long, long, long time. Actually, like it goes back years. Our guest probably doesn't even realize that. I talked to her fearless leader, Joe Sullivan, about Sultana like a couple years ago. We finally convinced her to join us. Sultana Mangal,
Nice.
good morning in your world. Happy Monday. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's so good to be here. How are you all?
Well, we are just beyond thrilled.
Ready.
There is a ton to unpack here today, and we're just so excited. And it's truly an honor to have you here, Damon. I had the honor and privilege. We got poor Sultana. She got stuck with me at the Industrial Marketing Summit. We had a wonderful little chat, and so it's like one of those things you meet somebody for the first time, and then you're like, "Hey, by the way, I have this little live show. Would you be a guest?" And so she really didn't have a choice, right, Sultana? Is that how that went?
No, I'm so glad that we met at the conference officially. We talked on LinkedIn and stuff. I think the first thing I said to you was like, "Are you sure you want me to be on your show?" Like I'm not. I'm more like behind the scenes, and so you convinced me over time.
Well, I wore her down, poor thing, So
Yeah.
that's how we roll. So Tana, we
Persistence.
have a
Yeah.
ton to discuss here. You're the client success extraordinaire at Gorilla 76, our dear friends. We've had, Joe's been on multiple times. We just love what you guys are doing with Gorilla 76. But before we dive into all your superpowers today, I'm going to go back in time for a little bit. Curious minds would love to know, Sultana, who was your hero as a little girl growing up? When you were a little girl growing up, who was your hero?
Yeah, I don't know if this is probably the answer a lot of people give. It's probably like one of your parents, but my mom is truly. I like both of my parents. It's hard to choose, but I'm choosing my mom. I think. Don't tell my dad that, but my parents are immigrants from Afghanistan, and everything that they've done to just move here and set up their own business and guide me through life is the most inspiring thing ever. I owe everything to my parents. But my mom is my my friend. She's definitely my hero.
Well,
Awesome.
gosh, just warmed our heart on this Monday.
Yeah.
And what's mom's name, please?
Her name's Saida.
Saida. All right. Well, hey, big shout out. Lots of love to Saida. So tell her that we're giving her, maybe her ears are ringing right now as we're singing her praises. And just a wonderful story. So they came, what year did they come to the United States?
So my dad came in 1980, and then my mom came in 84.
Nice.
Wow.
Awesome. What, man, that is awesome. And I tell you, they've raised just such a wonderful leader. We're going to dive into a bunch of things that you have going on. Very impressive what you've accomplished in your young career. Let's go here. So you go off to college, and now, as I understand, you became an intern with our friends at Gorilla 76. Do I have that correct?
Yeah. So my internship at Gorilla actually happened after college. I feel like I went to school and I graduated and I still didn't know entirely what I wanted to do. I worked at Lululemon actually, on the sales floor, in a store. And that was my first experience with an organization that actually had a really smart strategy around how they work with their customers. I had worked in retail before, but that was the first place where I had worked where they had buyer personas. They had a strategy around how you interact with your clients, from the language that you use with customers or clients, or whatever we call them then. And so I learned a lot of customer success and experience from them. That was my first introduction. And then I ended up, getting an intern at Gorilla. I was a strategy intern, which wasn't even really necessarily related to the role that I'm in right now. But eventually an account coordinator position opened up at Gorilla. I worked in that role for a couple of years, then into an account executive, and then into the role that I'm in right now. So it's been a fun journey.
Well, that's phenomenal. And we're gonna take a little detour. I'm dying to hear about Lululemon.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm a for if you're a branding guru, which I absolutely I'm not. But Lululemon has really an extraordinary track record.
Mhm.
I read the biography recently of the actually it was autobiography of the founder of Lululemon, and
Yeah.
he had how he built that company from scratch is truly completely fascinating. Damon, we always use that line: how do you out teach the competition? How do you out teach the competition? So Tana, what I read was when he started the company, he didn't hire salespeople, he hired educators. He called it, all of his folks were educators, and every person he was hiring professionals, people with law degrees, people with finance degrees, and like putting them on the floor to not sell, but to educate. Can you just share a little bit? Does that resonate, or how was your experience there?
Yeah, that was my exact title too. I was an educator, and so I remember like that's like a really hard thing to do, to like have consistent client and customer experience, and for it to trickle down from leadership to the role that I was in, it's pretty incredible. I think that just speaks to them as a company. But I remember like the intense training that we received. It was like weeks of training before we
Wow.
were even on the floor. You get familiar with their buyer personas, and this was like over 8 years ago. I don't know if they do the same thing. I remember the buyer personas were Duke and Ocean. Those were their names, and like, and they made X amount, and they were wherever in their careers, and we knew all of those details. And I knew, like, when I was talking to a customer, like I couldn't describe, and I wasn't supposed to describe a pair of leggings that's cute, because Ocean wouldn't describe her leggings as cute. Like, there were specific words that we would use. And so details like that, and even with how the store is organized. Like when you walk into a Lululemon, again, this was 8 years ago when I worked there, you have the director of first impression, a DOFI, and it's the very first person that you're greeted by at the door. And that person is going to make an impact on you as a customer, because it's like the very first touch point. And then from there, working to the back of the store, every single person is placed in a very specific part of the store to make sure that they're engaging with that customer as they're walking throughout. And other things, like if a customer touches a piece of fabric for 5 seconds or longer, if they touch 3 different items, you were supposed to walk up to them and be like, hey, like, how do you like to work out? What are you looking for? And start to engage them. So I'm kind of just talking about the details there, but I hope that kind of gives a picture of how much like strategy is even involved in, selling leggings.
Oh,
Well,
I hate to say it, I could geek out like for an
yeah.
hour. Damon, like what's your thoughts?
Well, yeah. I mean, you talk about the strategic positioning of people from the front to the back of the store. You talk about the attention of detail, like someone is touching the fabric, it's time to go talk to them. I mean, all these things, the little things add up to be mountainous differences between people that just do a little sales training and throw people out there, rather than the intentionally understanding the customer, really understanding what their actions in the store mean and how you can enhance their experience. And and I just love what you're saying. It's not because we're going to try to sell harder. It's because we're going to educate them and enhance their experience. And then if they like it, they'll buy.
Exactly.
And yeah, so cool.
Yeah,
So
and I think it's also a lot of Lululemon's strategy is also tied to the types of people that they were hiring, right? The culture that they have, the people that they bring into the store. Like it was, it's hard. It can be very difficult to get a job there. You go through like 3 to 4 rounds of interviews. You spend time with their team, and they're very particular about the types of people that they bring on too.
yeah.
Man, all right. Thank you for sharing that. And Sultan, we might have to geek out further on that, but feel free to incorporate that, because what I feel, this laid a great foundation for you on how you brought your talents, your skill, your passion to Gorilla 76, which is in the world of, as we've been talking offline, B2B, industrial and manufacturing, right? So, you could have taken your talents to multiple, if you wanted to pursue marketing or customer success as you are, you could have gone into healthcare, retail, you could have pursued a career, Lululemon or whatever. What attracted you to Gorilla 76 and being into the manufacturing space?
Sure. I get that question all the time. People are sometimes surprised when I tell them that I'm like in the manufacturing space, but it really makes sense. Because early on, when I was looking for different roles, I was looking for things that just aligned with my morals and values. That was very important to me. And I didn't want to work at a marketing agency that, promoted alcohol or certain things. And so I kind of just went down a list of agencies in St. Louis to see what other options were out there. And then I came across Gorilla, and I wasn't really familiar with manufacturing. I was like 23, 24 years old, discovering it. And the more I learned about it, the more I just love the industry. Like, I love the people who are in this industry. I love the stories, the family businesses that are there. It just has resonated with me so much over the years. And there are things in the world that I just didn't notice before until being in manufacturing, like things I just never thought of, had no idea even existed. And so I feel like I'm constantly learning, and like the growth and learning is never ending with manufacturing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And just like even looking over your shoulder or just everything, in the room, like everything was manufactured, right? So
Yeah.
you don't realize. And now probably, all the wonderful companies that you guys work with at Gorilla 76, you can drive by or, like, hey, I worked with this client that made that product, or I know how this is made now, or who knew how that was, right? Like getting underneath the hood and discovering a lot of different things. Has that been kind of a fun process for you over the years?
It's been really fun. Like, one of my favorite things to do is to be able to go out on site and actually be on a manufacturing floor. Like, I work from home. I'm working behind a computer, and so being able to just like get on the shop floor is really cool. And meeting all the people who are working there, and just kind of seeing how it all comes together.
Right. Well, I love it. And I think we're going to dive into talking about client customer success and that whole process. And again, like with your experience at Lululemon, that vast training and at every touch point, it's really not about the product. It's not about Lululemon itself. It's really about customer behavior, right?
Mhm.
And just
Exactly.
understanding your customer, and just, and I have a teenage daughter. And so like half of my, Lululemon is everywhere in my house. So I totally get it. And I just really admire when you look at a company started completely from scratch and turned into a publicly traded gazillion-dollar company. And it was really based on just their fierce, relentless drive of satisfying that client success. Do you agree with that comment?
Yeah, I do agree. And I think that there's so much that B2B companies can learn from B2C. I think there's a lot that can be adopted there. Like in our personal lives, like we're purchasing products and everything. And so we're interacting with these clients. And I always say that expectations for people in the B2B space are going to be what they're experiencing with those B2C companies. At least for me personally, it's like if I have a really great experience with whatever, shipping was really fast, or they wrote like a handwritten note or whatever, like those are things I now expect in any type of interaction where I'm making a purchase. And so it's like, how do you carry those things over into the B2B space? What does that look like for you? It's going to be different, obviously, but there are definitely like learnings that can be carried over.
Yeah. And so let's dive in there. And so, hey, happy Monday to everybody out there. Give us a big hello. Please connect with Sultana on LinkedIn.
Yep.
She's just a powerhouse, just a dynamo. We've got Allie here today. Damon, let's see. They're going to pull up. There it is. We've got Dana here today. Dana says hi. Hi, it's Dana from DZ
Boston.
Events in Boston. So happy Monday. Good morning to everybody. Good afternoon. Wherever you're at, drop us a note. Give us a comment. If you have any questions, we have a customer client success guru in the house here today. So we welcome you to pop in. So Sultana, let's dive in a little bit further. So we're, for small manufacturers, it's like, hey, we have a handful of customers, or, we just don't have the bandwidth or it's really just, treating that customer with just over the top. Walk us through some of the processes, some of the tips, advice that you'd like to offer as far as for small manufacturers with client success.
Yeah. And I think we wanted to get into this too. Like, I think doing the customer journey mapping is really important, because that helps you identify what all of those touch points are. It helps you understand what your overall goal is with your clients. I know in like manufacturing companies, you're not necessarily going to have a customer success representative. It might be a mixed role, right? You might have someone who is speaking to customers, and they're also doing something else too, right? Their sole focus may not be that customer success touch point, or that customer experience type role. But if we want to get into maybe the customer journey mapping, I'm happy to kind of talk about that.
Yeah, and as you go there, the big thing again, I love that we're tying in the Lululemon with manufacturing because Damon, this is a line that we hear B2B, we hear B2C, but you love that line H to H, right?
Yep.
What's
Yep.
so if that's new to anybody, what's H to H?
Human to human.
Human to human, right? So, just dive into that human to human. And so, Tana, you also mentioned that buyer persona, like you had Duke and Ocean, right? And so, and a lot of times, a lot of small, as entrepreneurs, it's that little bit of that, I call it that entrepreneurial curse. We try to be a little bit of everything to everybody. I love what you guys did, what you did at Lululemon. Like you really niche it down into a couple buyer personas. So whatever direction you want to go here, diving into how important that buyer persona is, and let's go through that buyer's journey if we could.
Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the most important places. Like when I'm talking about customer journey mapping, like it's basically a visual representation of your customer's experience from beginning to end, or if it's ongoing. And traditional journey mapping is going to have you go through stages like awareness and consideration, decisions, and retention and loyalty, all of that. But your starting place should be looking at like, what are you trying to achieve with your customers? And starting with your buyer personas or your ideal customer profile. That should be the North Star that guides you to what those interactions look like, how people feel in each of those stages, and what should be happening within your team internally at each of those stages. And so when I'm talking about like ideal customer profiles, for example, it's like, look at your firmographic characteristics. Like what's their industry? Where are they located? What's their annual revenue? Think about the budget that they have. What's the mindset of all the key decision makers? What is their product or service offering? What's their tech stack look like? Like really understand what those are and start to develop those. You could create these journey maps based on every buyer persona if they vary a lot. I always say it just depends on your organization, and don't overcomplicate it, right? Like this isn't to say to have like dozens and dozens of journey maps. Like at Gorilla, I have us with just one that works for us that helps guide those touch points. But just start with your buyer personas, your ideal customer profile, and that will help guide everything that follows.
How do you help? What do you say to a client, what manufacturer, whoever it might be, if you, I don't know, do you ever get any pushback or resistance? Like, it's hard for us to narrow it down because we sell to so many, and like you said, if Lululemon can, narrow it down to two, I think that's as small entrepreneurs, small manufacturers, we certainly could. Do you have any advice of like, how can we help a client, like understand how important, like try not to speak to everybody. Does that make sense? Does that, was there a question in there somewhere?
Yeah, I think my answer is almost like it varies to the question of it may vary for them too, right? Like I think if you can narrow it down to 1 to 2 specific people that you're trying to target, I think that's great. When you're creating these profiles for your journey map. But I understand, and I hear that, I feel like all the time, but it's like, oh, well, like, what about this like third or fourth person? And that's okay. But I think like you've mentioned this too, like the more that you can niche down, like the easier to get there.
Right.
But yeah, I think like just trying to narrow in on those key decision makers, like the handful that you have first.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, let's hit that for a minute. So again, like say there's a manufacturer out there listening to this, or like, okay, I'll agree, I'll play along with you. So purchasing. Typically, it's somebody in purchasing. Well, what does that person look like in purchasing? Are you targeting a government agency? Because that's a significantly different than say a 30-person manufacturer. Because like if it's a 30-person shop, the owner might be or probably is involved, or the person that's doing purchasing is probably also doing HR. They're also doing marketing and 5 other tasks versus maybe somebody in government, maybe that's all they're doing. In the same regard, maybe you're targeting engineering Ernie or engineering Elsa. So, you had Duke and Ocean. Do you have any examples, or could we dive in a little deeper on like, say the clients you work with, like how do you help like identify that engineer, or how do we identify somebody in purchasing? Could we go there for a minute?
Yeah, and I think it looks a little bit like different for Gorilla too, because I think like when I'm doing this journey mapping, it's more for like us,
for your clients,
yeah, or more for just like Gorilla when I'm creating like this process for everything. But if I were to speak to our manufacturing clients about like what it's like to build this out, I would just tell them like focus on these first. And then if there are additional personas that come up, like we can revisit those later, but like focus on the key decision makers right now and just start from there.
Yeah. That's phenomenal tip.
Great advice. Yeah.
So let's dive into the buyer mapping process, the buyer's journey. Let's walk us through those steps.
Yeah, so I talked about the ideal customer profile kind of being like the North Star of where you start. So I don't have this pulled up, but I can kind of speak to what I have it for Gorilla. Like on the left-hand side, I have that ideal customer profile because I want us to always be looking at that when we're talking about our journey map. And then once we get into the actual journey map, I have that divided out by the different like stages that a client might go through. So if they're in the sales process, for example, I want to know, how is the client feeling at that stage? Like, have they heard about Gorilla? Are they a little bit nervous? Are they unsure? Are they excited? I want to understand what those touch points are too. Like, do we have specific calls that are scheduled? What's the goal for that prospect at that time? And kind of going through that for every stage. So once that follows, maybe there's another stage of, discovery and alignment where we're understanding our clients' businesses even further. Like, what are those touch points? How is the client feeling? And that's kind of just repeated through every stage that the client goes through. It's important to understand all of that because they're going to feel different in every stage, right? Like early on, they're going to be excited to get started. They're going to kind of know how our process works, but not entirely. Once we get into a flow of working with our clients, they have a better understanding of what our process is like. And they continue to get integrated in all of that. And it's so important that we're supporting all of those changes because these aren't small purchases that our clients are making. These are pretty big investments that they're making throughout. And so we just want to make sure that we're paying attention to all of those stages.
Well, I love that. And our relationship with Joe, been on the show a number of times. And again, meeting you in person at the Industrial Marketing Summit, it's really my understanding or my perception of Gorilla 76 is you're creating a partnership, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you're dealing with different size companies, do you have does that journey map change with different customers, or walk us through that? Are there how do you pivot, or how do you manipulate? Not manipulate, it's definitely not the word. How do you massage it to kind of fit that customer? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I would say if you're aiming for an 80% match on your ideal customer profile, you're going to be in a pretty good place, right? You're going to have customers who may not fit that perfectly. And that's okay. I actually think it's going to be pretty rare where someone fits every single bit of that criteria. And so being flexible is really important. And I think that flexibility just comes in terms of how we're delivering our services. We're crafting messages for our clients. We're, launching content programs, or we're helping them write content or creating video. Or launching live series for them. We're helping them with their websites. We're doing all these different things. And I think the adjustments that help in that customer journey or client journey then comes in terms of how we're delivering it, right? It's we're listening to the client. Maybe there are specific goals that they have internally or timelines that they're driven by, understanding that and kind of adjusting that. So we're making sure that all of that is moving along. Excellent.
Okay. So let's go here. So you're working closely with your internal team, correct? Mm-hmm. And then how much how are you customer facing the entire time, or in that early stage, or because we're going to dive into getting that client success feedback, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to dive into that a little bit. What's kind of describe your role working with your team, and then how you're working with the client?
Sure. Yeah, my role, I used to be much more client facing. I manage fewer clients now, but my team that I manage is the main point of contact for our clients right now. And so we're all customer facing. My role right now is to guide my entire department to help them with the client experience and to make sure that our clients are seeing results too. That's the most important thing. And I'm sorry, I blanked on the second part of your question.
Yeah. So, well, you know what? So I'm going to take I'm calling an audible right in the middle of that question. Yeah. I had the honor and privilege of meeting a vast number of your team. How about we take a moment? Let's give a shout out to, we've mentioned Joe, co-founder John. How about shout out any other shout outs that we want to give to your teammates? Just the amazing, incredible team at Gorilla 76. We encourage everybody out there, Google or go to Gorilla 76. They have a wealth of information for manufacturers. But how about a little shout out to some of your teammates?
Yeah, I'll shout out my department, my client success team, Annie, Sam, and Alyssa. They are just wonderful. I truly don't even know what our department would be without them. They're rock stars.
Yeah, and if I caught a wonderful case study that your team put on at the Industrial Marketing Summit, and it was a big LinkedIn ads, and they did a step by step. Damon, it was just so impressive of how you
Mhm.
guys come in, walk through the process. It was just very impressive. As a matter of fact, we need to have those guys on the show. I'd love to do that case study on the show. I don't have much experience with LinkedIn ads. It was just fascinating to see how you come in and tackle that. So when an industrial client comes to you, they have different needs, different expectations, that type of thing. On your client success side, like walk us through like the case study. Was it Annie? I think it was Annie that did the case study at the Industrial Marketing Summit, if I'm not
Uh,
mistaken.
Grace and Aaron.
Oh,
Yeah, Grace.
Grace, it was Grace. You're right. Yeah, yeah. It was Grace. What like walk us through like a case study like that? Like how does that work, and how do we get that to that client success level?
Yeah, so I think like client success's role in that is going to be like listening throughout. Like I think that's a really important part of like listening to what's important to the client. Like what from the very beginning, like we all have to be aligned in terms of the goals that we have for our client. The client success team right now has specific touch points with the client where they should be asking those questions on an ongoing basis. We talk about like feedback a lot too, right? Like getting feedback from the team. But for that case study that was shared, I believe it was like a paid social one.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there are a lot of different team members who are involved in client success's role. For that is going to in that specific example, their role was like moving all of that along, right? It's almost like client-facing project manager for the client success person who
Mhm.
was working on that.
Mhm.
And so like the touch points are there to keep all of like the projects and everything moving along too. But again, it's just like listening to what their goals are, understanding them a little bit better, and making sure that our clients are seeing results.
Yeah, and what I loved and admired how they broke it down, went into timelines, expectations, communication with the customer,
Mhm.
what this looks like, when this is going to happen, and then when the party started, when they got everything set up,
Yeah.
these were the results. And Damon, you would have loved it. It was absolutely fascinating watching the concept. And so let's go here, Sultana. When customer either you exceed expectations, meet expectations, or maybe not quite hidden expectations. How do you kind of handle each one of those three scenarios?
Mhm. Yeah, I always tell my team that a happy, like just because also someone might not be providing as much feedback or is a little bit quieter, it doesn't mean that they're happy with results. Or they could love working with Gorilla, but at the end of the day, like our role is to make sure that our clients are seeing ROI. And so each of those conversations are going to look a little bit different. But it's really important again to just be listening for that and understanding like what's important to each client. I always kind of go back to that because that's like the core part of that
Yeah.
role.
Yeah. And hey, we've got a comment here from Dale. I want to pull up here. So
Yeah.
Real 76 bi-weekly industrial marketing live Zoom is awesome. Usually 50 to 80 industrial marketers bringing excellent insights. Sultana, do you want to just chime in on piggyback on Dale's comment there? Do you want to share a little bit on your bi-weekly Zooms?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, Dale. It's good to see you. He's always active on IML. Yeah, Industrial Marketing Live. I love the format. I was kind of talking about Industrial Marketing Summit earlier on here. Just kind of talking about how it just feels like old friends kind of coming together. But Industrial Marketing Live, I really like because I think as a marketer at a manufacturing company, you probably sometimes feel like you're alone or you're leading the charge and it's just you, and you have this community of people who also feel that exact same way and are very similar positions as you. And so I imagine that people leave that call feeling a little bit relieved that there are other people who are going through the same experiences as them, and just being able to brainstorm and have good dialogue too.
Yeah,
Yep.
I love that. And so I want to slide into I admire what you've done. You're an active community builder and you're big on leadership. So a couple of things that I want to point out that you've done. You're the founder of the Customer Success Leader. Can you share a little bit about this program that you've founded?
Sure. I just officially got it started earlier this year, but it's basically a community for people who work in client success roles, account manager roles, client support specialists. And it's a way for people to come together and learn from one another. So right now I have a small group of people who meet monthly over Zoom. It's a different format than IML. It's a little bit more
Yeah.
like intimate where we're just having discussions and learning from one another. And then I also have a monthly in-person meetup actually at St. Louis for people who are at the director level, to just be able to engage. And I wanted to be in person because I kind of missed some of the in-person nature of connecting with people. And so that's available. We have a Slack group too. Once I get better at doing, in-person speaking and stuff, I do plan on doing like a podcast eventually. So hopefully this experience today helps with that.
Well, absolutely. Well, you are doing phenomenal. Now you're also on your LinkedIn profile. You're also alumni of the Afghan-American community. So just share a little bit of what's going on there.
Yeah, my community is such an important part of who I am. It's important for me to be able to give back. So over the years, I've been involved in a couple different organizations. Afghan-American Community Organization is North America's largest community for Afghans who are born in the U.S. I attended a conference several years back, and I just felt like it made a really big impact on my life. And I think from that point on, I was just kind of reminded of how important it is for me to stay connected to my community and my parents' roots. And so a lot of that has kind of inspired my involvement over the years.
Well, I absolutely love it. And I think, tying this in with what you guys are doing at Gorilla 76 and then what you've done personally with the leadership program that you've founded and just, building, like, how important is it for community?
It's the most important thing. Like I always talk about this. And I think the reason I say that is because I kind of grew up in a like dual culture, right? Like I grew up in American culture, but also at home I had my Afghan culture. American culture is very like independent and I love it. And it's driven of like, you succeed. And my Afghan culture is like, we succeed together. And so I think just as humans, it's really important to have a community. And I think especially during the pandemic, I feel like we all learned how important that was. And so that's part of why the customer success leader is so important for me in building that community.
Well, I love it. And now you guys, I've talked to Joe recently, I think last month or in the past couple of months, you just launched a brand new community for manufacturers or for marketers. The collective, can we share what's going on there?
Yeah, so the Industrial Marketing Collective launched pretty recently. It's essentially like a learning collective for people who are marketers in manufacturing. And so there's like a free version where, you get access to IML and Slack and you get access to this community. And then the paid version has on-demand training and these weekly meetings where you can ask questions live. And so it's just, again, another way for people to just come together.
Well, I think it's phenomenal how, the entire team at Gorilla 76, between the Industrial Marketing Summit, what you're doing online for virtual communities. And like you said, so many marketers, you feel alone, you're in a silo, just kind of doing your own thing. You're bringing an opportunity for folks to collaborate. Iron sharpens iron, rising tides lifts all ships. And I just cannot express my respect and admiration for what you guys are doing to just really spearhead this community. Damon, your thoughts, your takeaways, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm just soaking a lot in here because, you think about what you're doing there at Gorilla 76 and then what you're doing on your own too is with the communities that you're building, but just the community aspect, the sharing of knowledge, the sharing of just, challenges that marketers are seeing in the industrial space is helping everyone so much. I mean, because a lot of people are kind of by themselves in a lot of respects. And there is so much, there are so many resources available, and it's cool to see you guys spreading it around and shedding a light on for people.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. So Sultana, what I want to do, so anybody out there, please connect with Sultana on LinkedIn, go to Gorilla 76. Sultana, what I'd love to do is I want to come back to the client success process. Now, do you have any, we talked before about having a system and having a process to get that feedback. I'll be the first to admit, I'm probably, I'm not the best at how do you get that feedback from a client? How did we do? Can you just share a little bit for how you do it at Gorilla 76 and maybe what are some systems or some processes as small entrepreneurs that we could apply or for our friends in manufacturing?
Sure. Yeah, I always say any type of feedback that you're getting, you should be getting it on almost any touch point that you have with the client. So if it's our consulting calls with our clients or our client success touch points, we should be getting that feedback on an ongoing basis. I never want us to wait for, a survey to go out. Like we should have a good pulse of that as a client success person. And so like that should always be the first thing that you default to. And then to supplement that, I always encourage people to have some sort of way to solicit feedback on an ongoing basis. So we use Ask Nicely at Gorilla just for us, for our clients. And I send out a quarterly NPS survey. It's a net promoter survey where we're essentially asking our clients, like, hey, would you recommend Gorilla to a friend? And that's like the ultimate indicator of whether or not like we're doing a good job of what we're doing. And so that survey is sent out. And then with that journey map that I noted too, I have specific surveys that go out at all those key touch points and stages. As the customer or client is progressing through our program, I want to make sure that we're asking the right questions, we're checking in and understanding how we're doing, and then we're actually acting on that feedback. You can collect all the feedback that you want, but if you're just listening and you're not acting on it, then like, what's the point, right? And so once you do that, taking that feedback and understanding how you can implement it. What I don't want us to do is to become reactive, where you see one line and you panic and you're like, oh my gosh, we need to change this entire process. That's not what it's for, right? It's to recognize patterns. Some things do require us to just like act on it, and we should, but it'll kind of depend on the feedback that's provided. But doing that on an ongoing basis is really important so that you have your in-person feedback that you're getting, and then you can supplement that with a survey that can go out too. And for small businesses, for manufacturing companies, Ask Nicely isn't going to make sense for everyone, right? Before doing Ask Nicely, I looked into probably like 10 plus different tools just to see what would make sense. I honestly have seen some manufacturing companies or companies just have a very simple email that goes out that will just be like a smiley face. It's like the smiley face scale, right? Like that's fine. That can work. The version of your survey is going to look different, but there are plenty of tools out there. And if you don't have the budget for the tools, then like think about how you're reaching out. Maybe you're sending a personalized email just to ask. Maybe you're giving them a phone call. There are ways to be able to incorporate feedback.
Right. I love this. I want to hit a couple of things real quick. How much have you learned like through the process of like, trial and error, like, hey, this didn't work so well, or like, how's the communication, again, for somebody that's just starting out there, you're further down the path. How's it been like your learning process of like really trying to master this art of client success?
Overall, or just specifically with the feedback?
Just kind of like overall, like what, like, from the time you started to like where you are today, what's been, like maybe for somebody who this is like really sinking in, saying, man, I need to start doing this. What's been your learning process through the journey?
Yeah, honestly, it's like observing, like John and Joe are really good. My bosses are really good at what they do. And I've observed them over the years. And I just started reading the things that they were reading, listening to the things that they were listening to. That gave me a deeper understanding of the types of clients that we're servicing. And I would encourage other people to do that, to learn as much about your clients first, what's important to them, so that you can then deliver good customer success, right? Or good customer experience. Understanding that is really important. And then again, just like reading the basics of customer experience. Like sometimes I think people we sometimes forget, like pick up the phone and just see how a customer is doing, right? Send them a handwritten note. Those things are really meaningful. And I think we've kind of lost a bit of that just over the years. Again, maybe the pandemic has kind of had us like not do that as often, but going back to the basics, I think is really important. And then just always learning, like listen to every podcast, read every single book that you can on customer experience. You're going to make mistakes along the way, right? But you're going to learn over time. When I first got started in this role, I didn't know entirely what I was doing, but I knew that I wanted to learn everything that I possibly could. And so I kind of used that as a starting place.
That's a great, phenomenal advice. Hey, we've got Skylar here today. Skylar says, wow, such great stuff. We've got Saiga here. It's a really good show, inspiring me. Thank you for the comments. Again, connect with Sultana on LinkedIn. Sultana, we'll start winding down those touch points. Okay. Like again, from my experience, my conversations with you, Joe, I just feel like, man, these guys have really mastered those touch points. For someone just starting out, like, how do you get into those touch points? So let's say, I'm a manufacturer, I'm getting that product out there. Do you have any advice or tips? like you said, like, sometimes it's just a matter of picking up a phone and just, hey, how was it? Did it arrive on time?
Yeah.
Are you okay? Like, is that any basics that you could cover as far as like those touch points to hit?
I mean, that is a great example, right? It's like when it's delivered, you call them and you say, hey, how was that process? How was your experience like working with us? Would you work with us again? Picking up the phone can lead to so many different conversations. So start with those basics. Write them a thank you letter. Say thank you for being a great customer, not just during holidays, right? Like I think people tend to send those out around Christmas, and send it randomly, send it in the middle of June, whatever. Right. Start with those basics, and then start listening, and then start getting proactive about reaching out too. Like maybe you saw something and it reminded you of a customer and you're like, hey, I just thought of you. Like, hey, your kid's doing kickball, right? There's a kickball league that's famous on, I don't know, I'm just kind of making up an example, but just listening, I think is really important.
It is. And I think those interactions, like you said, those non-scheduled impromptu interactions, you said, hey, I saw this and it may work really cool for what you're doing, or I saw this and it reminded me of you guys, or something like that. Just those little things make a huge difference.
Yeah. And a couple more comments here for you, Sultana. We've got, hey, I found this the show incredibly motivational. Well done. So Sultana, thank you for that. Dale says, hey, just pick up the phone. Yeah. Yes, indeed. And so we love that. Sultana, I'll tell you, your enthusiasm is just so contagious. Yeah. So as we wind down, how do you just love your job or what? I mean, it's just like, I just feel like this passion and enthusiasm is just coming through the screen. What a great title, Customer Success Director. How do you, do you just love, helping? It's just so admirable. You're just helping people on a daily basis. Like what are your thoughts there?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's the core of it too. Sometimes people ask me if I ever get like tired of this role, and I'm like, I'm constantly learning, and that's really important to me. But at the end of the day, it goes back to helping people. Yeah. And that's so important to me just in terms of, I feel like my purpose in life and what I want to be doing. And so continuing to get that fulfilled in this role is incredible. And again, like being able to work with the manufacturing community means a lot to me. A lot of times it's family businesses that just resonates with me and my own family. And just being able to help people grow in that way is really cool.
Well, absolutely love it. So we've got the Industrial Marketing Collective. So they can go to Gorilla 76, get involved in their community. You just announced last week the Industrial Marketing Summit, I believe, is coming up in February 2025 in Austin once again. So congratulations. We're super excited to support you.
It's going to be great.
There as well. You threw out a lot of wonderful tips, advice. You talked about Ask Nicely, going through that customer mapping, how important that buyer persona is. Any parting thoughts, words of wisdom that you want to share on just how to master that client success as we close out?
I think the reminder I would give is just don't forget the basics. I think that's the most important thing. As you said earlier, it's human to human. Just don't forget the basics.
Yeah. Don't forget Damon, drop the mic on that one. Don't forget the basics. That was phenomenal. So, all right, we're going to wrap up. And Sultan, now you're in St. Louis. I have one last question for you. Damon, I got it. I got to ask.
You got to go there.
I got it. So are you a Cardinals fan by any chance? If you live in St. Louis, are you a Cardinals fan or?
So I have to say, yes, I am, but I never watch sports, and I know that's not. But yes, I love the Cardinals. I was born here.
All right. So though you're not a sports fan, let's just say hypothetically, if either you're Cardinals game or maybe are you going to be speaking at the Industrial Marketing Summit next year? Or are we going to get you on stage or what?
Not yet. Maybe a future one. I'm
testing. All right. So all right. Sultana, when you give the keynote speech at either, the Afghan-American community or maybe your new leadership program or what, if you were given a keynote speech, let's say hypothetically, or let's just say for the Cardinals, they called you up and said, Sultana, could you come down here? We need somebody to get a base hit for us. If you're on your way walking up to the home plate to hit in a winning run for the St. Louis Cardinals, what would be your walk-up song?
Oh gosh. That's a good one. Oh, I do know it. It's Icky Thump by the White Stripes.
There you go.
That's a great song. That's a good time. Thank you.
That is a good song.
Good. Well done.
Yeah,
Sultana.
well done.
you played. That's our little thing that we do at the end there. So
Yeah.
So all right now, so Tana, when I see you in Austin in February, and hopefully I'm going to talk to, I'm sending your boss Joe. I'm going to send him a note, say, hey, Sultana said something about she wants to do like a speech or like give a little. And we've got her walk-up song already, Damon. So we're
we got
all
it ready.
We got it all ready. So Tana, I want to give a big shout out to you. I thank you, applaud you. I admire the work that you're doing. You're just such an amazing human being. You're just so refreshing to talk to. Your commitment to your family, your community, our manufacturing community, and just spearheading future leaders. As a proud girl dad, I just love talking to people like you. You're helping me be a better father, and I can just share what you're doing with my daughter. And so I salute you and thank you for what you're doing. So Damon, how about a round of applause for Sultana here?
It's been awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Everybody connect with Sultana on LinkedIn. Go to Gorilla 76, and we will be back here. We have another great guest. We have Holly is going to be with us on Friday, Damon. So our dear friend Holly will be back here. Sultana, hang out with us for 1 second, and we wish everybody an amazing, incredible week. And Damon, what do we like to say when we close out? Just be someone's inspiration, just like our dear friend Sultana is, and you're just going to make the world a better place. That's all. So we will see you guys Friday.